Before watching the video, I recommend that you watch the first part to understand the context. Thank you in advance, can continue watching.
Mermaids are social creatures that live in large communities that are structurally similar to those of humans or krakens. They live in large, enclosed cities located at the bottom of the ocean. These cities, like those of the krakens, are built from polymetallium, but they differ from them both in appearance and in content. From the outside, mermaid cities look like huge, dark blue coral reefs with several dozen glowing elements that are turquoise in color. The main entrance is located almost at the very bottom of the sand, and it is similar in design to the entrance to the city of the krakens. In addition to this entrance, there are several hidden exits located around the perimeter of the city. Inside the city of the mermaids, there is a vast network of corridors, alleys, and dead ends that can be difficult to navigate if you are not a mermaid. However, despite the apparent disorganization, this layout is not accidental and has a specific purpose. If you look at the mermaid city from above, you can see a pattern in its structure. At the very edge of the city, within the walls that protect it from the outside world, are the homes of the mermaid warriors, who serve as the first line of defense in the event of an enemy attack. The mermaid society is highly militarized, and service in the mermaid army is mandatory for all female mermaids. Every mermaid who reaches the age of 16 is required to join the army and serve for at least 3 years, with the possibility of continuing their service upon completion. During their service, they learn how to fight at depth, on the surface of the ocean, in confined spaces, and even in coastal areas. They are also trained in hand-to-hand combat and cold weapon fighting. The mermaid's primary weapon is a yellow-green polymetallic spear. They do not wear armor, except for the warriors of the Royal Guard, which will be discussed later. At first, it seems strange that a standard mermaid warrior has no protection, and many military thinkers in the underwater world often joke about it. Commander Shalden, a veteran of the Trident War, jokingly said, "I genuinely respect these fishtailed. I respect them for their bravery. Only a very brave creature would have the courage to fight with nothing but a bikini made of seashells." However, despite the humorous remarks, the reason for this decision stems from the military doctrine that these creatures have been following for thousands of years. Mermaids live in a very dangerous environment, where their potential opponents almost always have an advantage in size and strength. In such a situation, the only thing mermaids can rely on is their speed and agility. Not only would armor not protect a mermaid from an opponent that is several dozen times larger and stronger than her, but it would also make her slower and less agile, which could be fatal. To combat their larger opponents, mermaids have adopted a strategy known as the piranha strategy in their community. Alone, these predatory freshwater fish are not a great threat and are easy prey for larger predators. However, in a pack, piranhas are a feared threat. The same can be said for mermaids. Despite their appearance of fragility, they are physically strong, and their strength, combined with the razor-sharp tips of their polymetal spears, is enough to inflict deep, cutting wounds. In the case of an attack by a large enemy, the mermaids disperse and begin to strike the enemy with their weapons in all the places they can reach. Of course, the eyes, nostrils, gills, and ears, if any, are prioritized. This is rarely enough to kill the enemy, but it is often enough to force the intruder to retreat. In the event of an attack by an enemy that is not much different in size and weight from the mermaids, such as the siren sharks, special heavily armed units armed with a yellow-green polymetallic shield enter the battle. However, the tactic of the 1,000 cuts is the main one in the mermaids' armed forces, and its effective use requires a large number of soldiers and their close-knit work. Therefore, the mermaids' military unit is based on strong bonds between the warriors, a spirit of combat unity, and mutual support. Even in the official military regulations of the mermaid army, the first and most important rule is never swim alone. The second most important rule is never abandon a wounded comrade. Violation of these fundamental laws is punishable by dishonorable dismissal from the army, with loss of all privileges and titles. The regular structure of the mermaid army is divided into detachments consisting of 5 to 10 mermaids under the leadership of a sergeant, who wears one special polymetallic bracelet as a badge of distinction. A platoon, from 15 to 60 mermaids under the leadership of a lieutenant, who wears 2 bracelets. A battalion, from 100 to 300 mermaids, led by a commander with 3 bracelets. A division, from 500 up to 1,000 mermaids, commanded by a commander-marshal, with 4 bracelets. An army of 2,000 to 5,000 warriors, led by a mermaid general, with 5 bracelets, and finally a legion of 10,000 to 20,000 mermaids, led by a superior general, who has a special decoration around her neck and shoulders. The highest rank in the mermaid army is the Supreme Commander, which is held by the Queen of the Mermaids. Her insignia is, of course, a crown. But queens rarely personally engage in combat, often delegating command to other officers. However, if Her Majesty decides to leave the safety of the royal chambers and take personal command of the army, which is extremely rare, she will wear reinforced red polymetal armor. Her Highness is also always accompanied by the warriors of the Royal Guard, an elite security force whose sole purpose is to protect the Queen and members of the royal family, whom Her Highness personally selects from among the most distinguished mermaid warriors. Dressed in golden polymetallic armor and wielding a double-edged spear, they are fanatically loyal to the Queen and are ready to protect her wherever she goes, whether in the throne room, during her diplomatic missions outside the kingdom, or on the battlefield. But we lingered on the outskirts of the City of Mermaids. Let's go deeper, in the so-called residential area, in which, based on the name, peaceful residents live. Along the long tunnels, decorated with beautiful patterns and frescoes, there are round doors, behind which, like in human high-rise buildings, there are apartments inhabited by mermaids. As a rule, the average area of a living room is about 84 square meters. However, the size of apartments may vary depending on the type and city. A standard apartment consists of 2 bedrooms, a children's room, a dining room, a living room, and a bathroom. The interior of each individual apartment is unique and depends on the taste of the residents, but there is still a certain pattern that can be observed. In addition to the standard furnishings such as beds, tables, dishes, mirrors, folding cabinets for personal belongings, and more, mermaids' apartments are filled with various decorations, art objects, and relief images of family members, which are equivalent to our photographs on the walls. The mermaid community is highly secretive, and not every researcher from the underwater world has been able to enter their city. Even fewer have had the opportunity to witness the interior of a typical mermaid family's home. However, those who managed to do so were truly amazed by the grandeur of the homes of the ordinary inhabitants of the Mermaid Kingdom. The esteemed The Kraken naturalist Duncan was one of the few who were fortunate enough to witness the lives of ordinary mermaids from the inside, shortly before the Trident War, and he wrote about it in his work, The Most Complete Description of Underwater Races and Their Lifestyles. Here is a quote. "There are legends about what lies within the mermaid cities, and my expectations were quite high, but what I saw exceeded them many times over. One of the mermaid families allowed me to enter their apartment, and I was left speechless. My eyes couldn't focus on just one detail. Everything, from the furniture to the decorations, sparkled and screamed of grandeur. It was so beautiful, so magnificent, but also so empty. There was no need for such opulence. Well, there was one reason: to impress the neighbors. I visited several houses in the same neighborhood, and each one was more extravagant than the last. It was as if they were competing to see whose house was more ostentatious. There was no spiritual depth or artistic inclination in their lavish decor. It was all a show to impress their neighbors. The matriarch of one of the families told me that the day before my arrival, they had visited the mermaids living in the apartment across the hall, as their neighbors wanted to show off their beautiful home. However, this family did not hesitate and copied everything their neighbors had in just one day. And the matriarch told me about it openly, and she didn't even hide it. On the contrary, she was proud of it. And she wasn't the only one. I've interacted with many mermaids, from ordinary citizens to the nobility, and they all shared the same limited perspective on the world, driven by a spirit of narcissism, selfishness, and materialism. They flaunt the beauty of their homes, attempting to fill the inner emptiness of their souls. All they have is an oversized ego that is easily wounded. It is not surprising that after the publication of his book, it was banned in the Kingdom of the Mermaids due to being considered false and offensive. There was even a reward of 3,000 pearls or their equivalent for any creature who could deliver Duncan alive or dead. Pearls are the currency of the mermaids, which they use to pay each other for their work and to buy valuable items from their fellow mermaids. At the same time, it is worth noting that the value of pearls in the underwater world is not as high as it is on land, and the cost of a single pearl for mermaids is equivalent to approximately $75. Therefore, if we convert the reward for Duncan into dollars, it would be equivalent to $225,000. Interestingly, Duncan turned out to be an elusive kraken. He survived the Trident War and passed away at the age of 90 due to old age in 2018. The perception of mermaids as greedy narcissists who don't care about anyone but themselves is very common among underwater races. However, they often overlook certain characteristics that define this species, leading to a limited understanding of their culture and lifestyle. This limited knowledge often contributes to misconceptions about mermaids. To begin with, there is indeed a high level of competition within the mermaid society, which often manifests itself in the display of luxury. But this is not just a coincidence, as nothing in nature happens without a reason. The reason for this behavior is the desire to attract a potential mate. As mentioned in the previous part, mermaids face a severe shortage of males, with only one merman for every 20 mermaids. Even with the practice of polygamy among mermaids, this is still not enough to meet the needs of each individual. Therefore, there is a lot of competition in their society for the attention of mermans. Or rather, not for the mermans themselves, but for their mothers, as their society is completely matriarchal due to the disproportionate number of female mermaids. Mermans have limited rights and freedoms. They cannot hold public office, have the right to vote, or serve in the military. They do not have property rights and do not receive formal education. Boys are educated only at home and learn from their fathers. Their training mainly includes housekeeping and child rearing, which they are required to do, as they are not allowed to work in any other capacity. Of course, there were exceptions, and despite the restrictions, some mermen were quite influential and achieved high social status. For example, King Garm, who could not inherit power, but had a significant influence on the aristocratic circle and even accompanied his wife on military campaigns. However, this was an exception. The matriarchal nature of mermaid society extended to their private lives as well. Mermen were not allowed to enter public spaces without their wives or other female relatives, and they were also prohibited from engaging in conversations with other mermaids who were not part of their family without their permission. Merman also has no say in choosing a mate. Choosing a wife for her son is an exclusive prerogative of the mother, and her decision is often dictated not by romantic considerations, but by practical calculations. The key factors are the financial situation, reputation, and, oddly enough, the interior of the potential bride's home. After all, the more beautifully decorated the apartment, the more details it has, the more difficult it is to maintain. And if a single mermaid can maintain her home in a dignified manner, then she will be able to handle the management of a family. After all, no matter what the system is, matriarchal or patriarchal, any mother always wants her son to be happy. Therefore, a mother carefully inspects the home of her son's possible wife, for many weeks or even months, while the future bride continues to maintain her level and update her wardrobe with the latest fashion trends. Only when the mother is sure that her choice is right does she allow the girl to meet her son, who may not have even seen his future wife before this moment. When all the issues are resolved, the newlyweds have a wedding, which begins with a wedding procession, in which the husband's father, mother, and female relatives accompany him to the bride's house, where his wife and her relatives are waiting for him. After this, the wedding ceremony begins at the bride's house, where the husband and wife publicly declare their consent to the marriage, followed by the signing of a contract between the husband's mother and the bride, which makes the marriage legally binding. After the traditional wedding rituals, a banquet is held. At this event, guests and relatives share a festive dinner and enjoy time with the newlyweds. However, even after marriage, the husband's mother holds great significance in the new family. It is the mother-in-law who is responsible for finding other unmarried mermaids who could become wives for her son. But now she is considering this issue with daughter-in-law, who can either agree or refuse her mother-in-law's choice. If she does not object, the family may have a new wife who is lower in status than the first wife, as the hierarchy in the family is determined by who is the first wife. When a second wife is added to the family, the first wife gains the status of matriarch and may no longer consider her mother-in-law's opinion in the family's future. The younger wives become her subordinates and must obey her in all matters. She decides who spends how much time with the common husband and whose children get more privileges. Mermaids are viviparous creatures. Pregnancy lasts the same amount of time as in humans. Usually, one child is born, but sometimes 2 or even 3 children are born. Mermaid babies are born fully formed and resemble human infants, but with fishtails. However, the rate of development of a young mermaid is significantly faster than that of a human child. Instead of nursing for 2 years like humans, A young mermaid feeds on its mother's milk for only 3 months before its baby teeth are replaced by permanent teeth and it begins to eat solid food. From this point on, the father of the family takes on most of the responsibility for the child. In most families, all children are girls. The birth of a boy is considered a great blessing and is celebrated with great fanfare, as it not only brings a new member to the family, but also serves as a way to increase the family's social standing and influence within the clan. A mermaid who gives birth to a son automatically becomes the matriarch of the entire family, regardless of the order in which she became a wife. As a result, there is a constant struggle between mermaids in the same family to be the first to give birth to a boy. This obsession sometimes leads to comical situations. For example, 60 years before the Trident War, a mermaid named Clea gave birth to triplets of boys, which was an abnormal outcome. After that, she went from being an unknown mermaid who was lower in status than the other wives to being the matriarch of the family and a superstar who received an audience with the queen and even received the nominal title of Great Mother. Let's return to the city's layout. In the heart of the city, there is a so-called business district. This district houses everything necessary for the city's residents to enjoy their leisure time. Schools, where children are enrolled from the age of 7 and receive a 6-year education covering various subjects, from biology to astronomy. Markets, where a wide range of goods are sold, from food harvested by hunters outside the city or grown on plantations within the city, to handcrafted artworks. Inside the business district, there was also a so-called mint, which was essentially a large pearl-growing farm for use in the domestic market. To prevent inflation, it was forbidden to bring pearls from the wild into the city. Any attempt to do so was considered a Class 1 smuggling offense and was punishable by death. The decision on such an issue is made by the court, which, as you might have guessed, is also located in the business district. Mermaids live according to a set of laws called the Code of Rights, Prohibitions, and Obligations. Among the rights of mermaids, there is the right to freedom and personal independence from another mermaid, the right to living space in the city, the right to receive financial assistance in case of financial problems in her family, the right to carry weapons and participate in the people's militia, and the right to move freely outside the city. This only applies to mermaids, as mermen's had their own code with almost no rights. Among the prohibitions for mermaids, there were standard items such as prohibiting murder, theft, smuggling of prohibited goods, corruption, and more. At the same time, the code specifies the types of punishment for breaking the law, from fines for damaging someone else's property to the death penalty for murder, smuggling, or intimacy with members of other races. This list also includes punishments for immoral crimes, such as the adoption of children of other biological species or homosexuality. For such actions, mermaids have their hair cut off. It is worth noting that hair holds great religious significance in mermaid culture, as it is considered a sacred gift from Poseidon and an important aspect of individuality and discipline. Therefore, every mermaid must take great care to maintain their hair in proper condition. The most important aspect of hair is that it must be natural, so it is forbidden to dye or style it. Mermaids also have a rule about the length of their hair, which should be up to the middle of their tail, but no longer. In contrast, mermen's hair should be below their shoulders, but no longer than half of a human's height. Therefore, it is important to trim their hair regularly to prevent it from becoming too long. As a rule, combing and cutting hair is the responsibility of its owner, but sometimes a mermaid may allow someone else to take care of her hair. This request may be made to a relative or a very close friend. This gesture is a sign of absolute trust and love. As you can imagine, hair plays a significant role in the lives of mermaids, and having it cut off as a punishment is an incredibly shameful experience for those who have to endure it. Since mermaids' hair grows 4 times slower than humans, it will take a long time for a guilty mermaid to regain her dignity. Every mermaid's duties include obeying the laws, serving in the army, coming to the kingdom's aid in emergencies, defending it from enemies with weapons in hand, studying, and taking care of the families and the kingdom's well-being. Well, these are all laws, so let's move on to a more interesting topic, entertainment. Among the mermaids, there were various games that included sports competitions, such as agonas, which was similar to competitive swimming, and intoli, a game resembling rugby, where a round sea sponge served as the ball. Wagers were often placed on the outcome of these games. The objective was to throw the sea sponge into one of the 2 stone rings that protruded from the center of the platform. However, the mermaids were primarily known for their incredible passion for gambling. The game of dice is especially popular. It is played with 1, 2 or 3 dice, which were thrown by hand or with a special cup. The greatest luck is considered to be to throw 3 sixes. Tilia. The chips are placed on the playing field. The roll of the die determines how many squares the player must move the chips, and the ultimate goal is to cross the field first. Pyrgos is an analog of Jenga. Fugu, Shark, Killer Whale, is a game similar to Rock, Paper, Scissors, where the shark eats the fugu. The killer whale is poisoned by the fugu, but eats the shark. This game is popular among both adult mermaids who play for bets and young children. However, one game that is not suitable for children is the Sea Dogs Fight, a bloody spectacle where bets are placed on the outcome of a fight between 2 or more sea dogs. Often, these fights end in the death of one of the animals. Fortunately, Nerissa, the last and de jure reigning queen of the mermaids, has banned the fighting of sea dogs as, to quote the law, an excessively cruel, barbaric, and unacceptable spectacle for our glorious civilization. For such entertainment events, there are special gambling establishments where visitors can relax and legally spend their pearls on gambling. It is worth noting that mermaids are mostly serviced by mermens. These are usually young men who do not yet have wives or children, but this is not always the case. Escort services are one of the few activities that mermens can engage in. However, they can only do so with the permission of their mothers or wives, who receive a portion of the profits. Mermaids of all social classes, from commoners to nobles, visit gambling establishments. Here, we return to the city map and move to its center. Here, in the heart of the city, the most noble and wealthy mermaids live in huge apartments. These are usually the owners of the gambling establishments, the highest military commanders, hereditary judges, and the owners of the plantations where edible seaweed is grown, which is the main dish in the mermaid's diet. The most privileged position is held by the vice queen of the mermaid city, who has full authority over the city and its inhabitants, with the exception of the army, which is directly subordinate to the highest general. As a sign of distinction, the vice queen wears a ceremonial headdress resembling a shell. The vice queen is appointed by the mermaid queen from among her most trusted advisors, and her tenure is unlimited and depends on how well she performs her duties. Otherwise, the mermaid queen may remove the vice queen for inefficiency or loss of trust and appoint a new one in her place. The longest-serving vice queen was a mermaid named Lydia, who lived during the Age of Discovery. She ruled the city of Ricum, located in the Mozambique Channel, for 65 years. There are at least 200 mermaid cities scattered across the world's oceans. Each city has its own unique name and appearance, but they all share the same characteristics described earlier. The population ranges from 60,000 to 100,000 and does not exceed this number. However, there is an exception in the form of a city located in the heart of the Pacific Ocean called New Thetis, which has a population of 200,000 mermaids. Another unique feature of New Thetis is that it does not have a vice queen, as it is directly ruled by the queen of the mermaids, who resides there. Yes, that's right, New Thetis is the capital of the Mermaid Kingdom. The Mermaid Kingdom is an absolute monarchy, where all power is held by the Mermaid Queen. The Queen is the head of state, the religious leader, the prime minister, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and the supreme judge. The Queen's husband holds the title of King of the Mermaids, but he is not a sovereign monarch in his own right. It is worth noting that if the Queen marries a merman, she becomes his only wife and will not share him with anyone else. Power is inherited from the mother to the eldest daughter. If Her Highness dies without leaving an heir, the power over the kingdom, as well as the late queen's husband, passes to one of her female relatives. Despite the absolute power of the queen, the kingdom of the mermaids has a government body that resembles a parliament, known as the Assembly of the Worthiest. This body is composed of the queen and her family, as well as a superior generals, vice queens, and representatives from the kingdom's wealthiest and most influential families. The Assembly of the Worthiest is convened at the Queen's discretion during critical moments to provide assistance to the government. It serves as a platform for discussions on matters such as taxation, peace agreements, negotiations, and occasionally, political solutions to internal conflicts, as well as proposals and requests from the Queen's subjects. The Kingdom of the Mermaids includes not only the territories of the underwater cities, but also the area of the seabed 50 kilometers around them. Thus, the Kingdom of the Mermaids covers an area of 10,000 square kilometers. However, geography, the territory of the kingdom is not uniform. Since there is a wide range of distances between cities, the Mermaid Kingdom is a collection of many separate enclaves throughout the world's oceans. However, the Mermaid Kingdom is not like the Kraken Kingdom, which is more of a union of different kingdoms. The Mermaid Kingdom is a centralized and relatively culturally homogeneous state with a vertical power structure led by a single queen. The Mermaid Kingdom has its own flag and anthem, which is called, "We Are the Children of Poseidon." This ancient Greek god holds great significance in the culture of this underwater people. Despite their matriarchal society, Poseidon is treated with utmost reverence and awe. The reason for this lies in the mythology of the mermaids, which dates back to their origins. However, this story will be covered in the next video.